and she did a science hub about the effects of ice storms and the replicating that up at Hubbard Brook. So really glad to have Lindsey, and joining her are Nikki Lindt, who's an artist. She did a residency at Hubbard Brook. She got her MFA at Yale. She currently lives in Brooklyn, but was born in the Netherlands. She's been studying permafrost in Sweden, Alaska, and other places in the Arctic. And she has some really cool recordings I'm looking forward to. And then Jenny Bauer, who is a PhD student at UVM, also adjunct professor of St. Michael's College, has been studying the role of subsurface nutrients in weathering and materials, and kind of tying this all together about the mystery of what happens beneath the ground. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to their presentations. And thanks, Lindsey, Nikki, and Jenny.
Okay, so I will kick this off, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And Roger, if you can give me a heads up if that's showing up.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect.
Oh, okay, great. So, gee, it's great to be here tonight. I wish we were all together. I've done one of these before, and it was just a great way to get together and talk about our science, our life, our pursuit of happiness in the North Woods, but we'll have to make do with virtual. So I am delighted to kick off this evening's event on soundscapes beneath the forest floor, soil, water, and rock interactions. And I'm going to go first to introduce the topic by sharing my personal reflections on the forest underground, and that's that dynamic half of the forest that many of us never see or maybe never even think about. And I'm also going to tell you how I first met Nikki Lindt, an artist and landscape interpreter extraordinaire, and how we came to launch an art-sci collaboration on Beneath the Forest Floor. And from there, Jenny Bauer will dig in a little deeper with some more in-depth science about our soils. So just a little bit of repeat here. I am a forest ecologist with the USDA Forest Service, and I have spent the better part of the last 30 years trying to understand what makes northern forests tick, and particularly how forests respond to and recover from disturbances like air pollution, climate change, and extreme weather events like those ice storms that Roger talked about. I'm also the Forest Service team leader for the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest, which is an outdoor laboratory not far from the Squam Lake watersheds in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And here is an eagle's eye view of Hubbard Brook just a couple days ago. It's a nearly 8,000 acre forested valley, and it's covered with a mix of northern hardwoods like beech, birch, maple, with some spruce and fir at higher elevations like you can see here. I get to spend a lot of time in the forest, both for my work and recreation. And I would like to virtually walk you through how I think about and study the above and below ground parts of these magnificent ecosystems. So let's start with the above ground and think spring, think summer. It's not that far away. So what can you see? You can look up, and you can see tree trunks and branches and twigs and leaves. You might also see birds hopping on branches, or squirrels scurrying down the tree trunks. Or maybe, if you're lucky, a larger mammal like a moose, like this one I ran into late last summer. And then there are those insects, right? A butterfly flitting by, or maybe that annoying mosquito or black fly. Remember those? And if you look closely, you might see ants or beetles marching across decaying logs on the ground. And you'll likely see water, a stream, a pond, a lake, or maybe a vernal pool. And you might see rain, sleet, or snow, dew on a leaf, or some ground fog if it's morning. And you can look up, right, and see the space between the trees, which we know is filled with air. It's self-composed of gases such as nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. And the sounds, it's kind of hard to play these on Zoom, but the above ground forest is alive with sounds, right? Water flowing, rain dropping, birds singing, squirrels scolding, cicadas chirping, the wind rustling leaves. And you can touch the above ground forest, like the rough surface of a shagbark hickory, the soft mound of moss, or the poke of a wild raspberry thorn. And finally, the smell, right? You all know it. That deep, rich, earthy fragrance of decomposing leaves in the fall, or that sharp, almost turpentine-like smell of firs, spruces, and pines that we can smell even in the wintertime. So this is the forest ecosystem that we all know because we can see it, hear it, touch it, and smell it. But what's below all of that? Did you know that there is a whole other half of the forest ecosystem below ground that you cannot see, hear, touch, or smell? I don't have pretty pictures because it's hard to take pictures below ground. But consider you are standing in that forest again and imagine that forest as a reflection, equally large, complex, and diverse, but upside down and underground. The roots stretch from the base of the tree, from large trunks to branches to tiny microscopic roots. Whereas the leaves draw carbon dioxide out of the air and convert it to sugar to provide energy for the tree, the dense network of tiny roots extract water and nutrients from the soil to provide the tree with liquid and food. And entwined with and even within the roots are symbiotic fungi, collectively called mycorrhizae. The fungi play a vital role in helping the trees take up water and nutrients from the soil, and in return, they get a rich source of carbon and energy from the trees. Meanwhile, between the roots in the soil, animals like mice, moles, voles, and shrews make their nests, burrows, and tunnels and go about their daily and maybe their nightly lives. And other critters, large like earthworms, centipedes, and nematodes, and tiny like microscopic bacteria, conduct their business of chewing through and decomposing massive amounts of organic matter. Their breath returns carbon from the soil to the air as carbon dioxide, and their waste products recycle nutrients that fuel both the below and the above ground ecosystem. The structure of the below ground ecosystem is different from the above. It's supported by soil, which is made up of particles, which we classify as sand, silt, and clay. And between the soil particles are immense, that is, if you're a microbe, pore spaces that are filled with water and air. Too much water and the soils are waterlogged, and our soil organisms don't have enough oxygen to breathe. Too much air and the soils are dry, and soils don't have enough water to live. Life below ground is a delicate balance for resources in space and time. So, how do we scientists study all of this? The above ground is easy. We can measure how fast trees grow in diameter and height. We can collect and analyze leaves. We can measure the amount of light passing through the treetops and take pictures of the structure of the forest canopy. We can put out cameras and capture images of animals day or night, and put out sound recorders and capture the sounds of the birds and bats, again, day or night. And we can put out traps and capture and count insects. For the water cycle, we can take samples from streams to measure water quality and put up structures called weirs to measure water flow. And we can monitor weather at ground level or at the top of the forest canopy. All of this is relatively easy. But below ground, sheesh, we don't have X-ray eyes and we cannot see below ground. And as soon as you dig a hole to peer into it, you've disturbed the system. As a forest ecologist, my job is to understand the entire ecosystem from the top of the trees to the bottom of the rooting zone. And I've spent much of my career trying to study the below ground components of our forests, including the soils, the roots, the microbes, and the below ground climate. It's hard work. For soils, you have to dig it up, tons of it, weigh it, sieve it, dry it, and grind it up to analyze it. And roots are worse. For big roots, you have to take a shovel or excavator and literally dig them out of the soil. For fine roots, you can insert a tube into the soil, collect a soil core, separate and analyze the soil, and laboriously remove the roots from the soil with tweezers, and then separate them into live and dead roots of different sizes from different species. It's one of the hardest jobs in soil science. I know, because I've done a lot of it. And finally, for soil climate, temperature, and moisture, you have to dig a pit, install sensors, backfill, and then you can monitor. Studying the below ground is challenging, to say the least. So when Nikki Lindt showed up at Hubbard Brook to work with me on an art-sci project to explore the connections between the Arctic and the northern forests of New Hampshire, and she brought with her a rugged microphone called a hydrophone to listen into the soil, I was awestruck. And like many good collaborations, I think the connection between us was instant and our ideas flowed, building off each other. And soon, with Nikki's knowledge of Arctic permafrost soils and my lifetime quest to understand the below ground forest ecosystem, it was not long before we dug a small soil pit, inserted the hydrophone into the soil, and began listening into the underground. Honestly, I didn't really think we would hear anything, and it was a little bit of a lark. But to my surprise, and Nikki's, the below ground was filled with sound, deep, resonant, echoing, rich sound, and we were entranced. And we were soon off and running, listening in to all kinds of forest soils, typical soils, disturbed soils, wet soils, dry soils. And it was endlessly fascinating. And we imagined ourselves to be denizens of the underground, listening into footsteps in the distance. Could that be a predator or prey? Listening into trees rubbing together overhead. Could that be a storm coming? And then what were those crackling sounds we couldn't identify? Could that be roots growing or earthworms munching? There was so much to hear. So that was 2 summers ago, and that was the start of a new art-sci collaboration, which we are continuing today, expanding our listening into new forests and new landscapes as I try to tie the sounds to science and Nikki to create art. And I will leave you with 3 clips. We'll try this. 2, listening into soils as if you were a sleepy chipmunk. And the 3rd, for fun, listening into beneath the frozen Main Lake as if you were a brook trout laughing at the steps of the ice fissures above. So this first one is from a sensor I buried last fall, about 8 inches deep beneath the soil surface, about where a chipmunk might have a winter burrow. This was a winter wind and rainstorm on January 16th. And let's see if you can listen in. So I'm going to play about 20 seconds of this. So that's the sound of the wind from underground and trees knocking together and a little bit of the rain in the background. So here's from the same buried sensor a couple weeks later as I walked over the snowpack, and you can hear the crunching of my feet. And finally, for fun, here's a clip I took this afternoon where I'm dropping another sensor about 4 feet down under the ice. Again, the sound is from the sensor, and here the video is simply from my smartphone. I'm not sure I explained that last time. Whoop, hang on. Let's see if we can play this. So if you like ice fishing, watch this space. There's lots more to come, and we'll be posting. And with that, I'd like to hand the virtual podium over to Nikki Lindt. Nikki, I'm going to stop sharing. And I have the spinning wheel of death. I may have to close the program and get back in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if the screen is frozen, because let's see, maybe if I share screen, then I can.
We've got your screen now, Nikki.
Okay, is it, you know, it's acting a little funny. Okay, now the screen is back to normal now, so it should be good now. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I think your screen share went away. Sorry.
Okay. I apologize. For some reason, this is not working for me.
We did test all this stuff, folks.
Yes, we did. Are you seeing this?
Yeah, we
full
are.
screen?
Yeah.
Okay, then that's fine. It's for me, it's looking very different, but okay. All right. Can I ask you what you're seeing? Because for me, I'm not seeing my first slide.
We're not seeing your first slide, but you should be able to adjust your slides.
Okay, got it. I think I have it now. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. All right. So 2 summers ago, I found myself in Alaska, driving on one of the most remote and dangerous roads in the country, the Dalton Highway, which leads to the Arctic Circle. It has only 3 towns along the way with a total permanent population of around 57 people. So it's really, really remote. But before I delve into the story, I'd like to take the time to introduce myself. My name is Nikki Lindt. I'm a visual artist living here in New York City. And for about the last 20 years, my work has focused on environmental awareness. I often collaborate with others, such as scientists and philosophers. And I express myself in different mediums, in different forms, in painting, installation, video, and in sound art. Those are the predominant mediums that I use. So I'm going to focus on 2 projects today. I'm going to start with the forests of the Arctic, and then discuss the underground sound project beneath the forest floor that I'm working on with Lindsey, who talked a little about that just now as well. So a few years ago, I remember reading yet another science article on climate change, and this one was specifically about thawing permafrost. I read about collapsing houses and roads, but wondered how this translated to the landscape as a whole. So I reached out to scientists at the Permafrost Lab in Fairbanks, Alaska, who agreed to teach me how to read the land so I could understand what I was seeing, which brings me back to why I found myself in the distant tundras of Alaska. So what I found and recorded in the coming days was shocking. I learned what a drunken forest is. I took this photo in the Fairbanks area of Alaska. So a drunken forest is a forest where the thawing permafrost destabilizes the ground underneath it, which causes the trees to lean in all directions imaginable, even horizontally, and they're growing like that. I also encountered sinkholes of the north, which are called thermokarst failures. And I saw many scattered all over the forests and tundra, some as large as football fields, with adult trees dangling over their sides like toys. Here's one in the tundra where you can see that the forest is not in this one. So while I was there, I started sketching. I made travel drawings while I was going through the area while in the spring of 2018 and 19. In order to be able to work as I traveled through the tundra, sketching was really a very good method for me, as well as photography and video and recording. I made these pieces with markers and acrylic pen in 6 by 9 inch sketchbooks. And when I got back to New York City, I translated these drawings, my photos, and my own memories into large scale pieces like this one, some as large as 5 by 7 feet. These are made with watercolor and acrylic paint in a similar layering process that ultimately felt very fitting. I realized that I wanted to work with opposing forces in my materials. So these are made with very transparent, luminous watercolor juxtaposed with heavy acrylic marks. I realized that what really captured me most, though, was when confronted with these terrifying changes, was that there was simultaneously an equally strong feeling of devastating loss, yet at the same time, overwhelming beauty in the very present life force. This duality has been the subject of my work in this series. It also is the focal point in this design that I'm working with Amanda White. She's an installation designer at the UN, though this piece is not for the United Nations. We're collaborating on an installation piece of the photos and videos I took in Alaska. This is a page from the pamphlet that we made, and you can ignore the text. Soon after, when I returned from Alaska last summer, I went to the Hubbard Brook Cooperators meeting by invitation of Lindsey. We had connected because of her extreme weather work, or actually our common extreme weather work. And she thought it would be good for me to see what was going on there as I was planning my project, because I was coming back to do a residency about a month later. So I visited the cooperators meeting and sometimes didn't understand much. Many presentations by the scientists working in collaboration with Hubbard Brook were speaking on very specific technical soil issues. So I was wondering how I was going to work this into what I was doing. But what I did pick up on and very much stuck with me was that there was missing nitrogen and phosphorus in the soil, and that the scientists had no idea why and where these were going. I was so captured by this underground world that had all these mysteries and was enclosed in darkness. And I had several ideas on how to spend my time at Hubbard Brook, including focusing on the ice storm experiment that Lindsey had been working on, but ultimately decided to bring a recording device. I had recorded in the permafrost in the Arctic and was very curious what there would be to hear underground in the forest. So the day I arrived, Lindsey and I decided to have a listen, and we got very excited. The sounds underground were surprisingly resonant and traveled really far. If you made footsteps, you could hear them 20 feet away, which was really surprising to us. So this past spring, in the time of COVID, my family and I spent a few months upstate in a rural area, and I started recording underground there. Lindsey and I decided to make use of the opportunity, and I did a remote residency while I was up there. I almost felt like I was checking the ground's vitals with my instruments and my headphones on. And there I discovered that even snowflakes landed on the ground with a thud. So this super visual above ground and hyper resonant underground really excite me. And I created a video as a result, which I'd like to play for you all. Before I play it though, I just wanted to let you know that there's you'll see two images. One represents sort of the above ground and one is the underground. So when the top image is more lit, you'll hear the sounds that are above ground. And when the bottom image is more lit, then you'll hear the sounds coming from underground. Okay, so that's some of the work that I've been doing as an artist with underground sound. And now I'd like to hand it over to Jenny Bauer.
All right, thanks, Nikki. All right, so I love what Nikki said about reading the permafrost landscape, because I want to talk to you about how my research has allowed me to read part of the underground landscape, and I hope to help you perhaps see some new things as well. So have you ever gone walking at upper elevations of the White Mountains or Green Mountains and noticed a light gray, whitish, almost ashy looking sandy sediment along the trail? It looks a little like someone poured out the ashes from a wood stove. This is what I'm talking about on the left in the pit and cradled by me in the photo on the right. It's not ashes, but an indication of our temperate climate and how the soil, some of the soils form in such a temperate ecosystem. So these are two examples of a soil E-horizon, which stands for eluvial and is light gray in appearance. It's a common forest soil horizon here in the Northeast. So what gives the soil this distinctive color? I'm giving it away in the title. Water is a potent chemical force. Rainwater precipitates from above, carrying dissolved carbon dioxide and anthropogenic sulfates and nitrates, which all form acids. Then it percolates through the organic forest floor, picking up more dissolved carbon dioxide and organic acids from roots and hyphae and microbes, perfect for dissolving soft minerals, which I know is a really vague word, but essentially it leaves behind quartz, feldspars, and some muscovite. It's not unlike pouring beer into the ground, although I don't recommend that, especially if you want to drink it. Wait, the pour on this is all wrong, so I just need to tilt the glass a little bit. There we go, that's better. So some of what dissolves, it actually ends up lower in the soil profile, while some heads to the ocean. In this image, you can see that below the light gray horizon, there's a dark, almost reddish brown horizon. And what's happened here is organic components have bound to iron and aluminum, and then they drop out a little lower to form that dark brownish color. They're actually kept here. Some other products go to the ocean, especially carbon, since carbon mineral weathering is the main source of carbon sequestration. So these mineral reactions suck carbon dioxide out of the air, and it leaves the soil in the form of carbonate, which eventually, if everything goes right, can help form the shells of sea life. What's left behind? Resistant, light-colored minerals like quartz remain in that leached horizon that I've been focusing on. What's interesting is quartz has some resonant properties of its own that might make it fun for Lindsey and Nikki to listen to. It's piezoelectric, which is why we use it in our watches, has a vibrational frequency. So maybe these quartz-rich horizons sound different than the lower horizons. I'd be interested in that. Okay, so I showed you what this water-sourced weathering does to soil. What does it do to rock? Well, in combination with biota, we can see the effects from tree tip-ups, which are a common agent of change in our forests. So you can see a young tree has peeled off of this rock, exposing the root system and the surface. If we get up close, the surface of this bedrock is strongly pitted and a little orangish. Resistant minerals like quartz stand in relief, similar to that light gray soil horizon, showing the absence of other minerals through the surface topography. But never fear, this surface won't stay bare for long. Here's another tip-up, which has added decomposing organic matter to the surface. Some ferns and mosses are starting to set up shop. And the fresh mineral surfaces, which were once exposed, are now starting to combine with that organic material to form a baby soil. So nothing stays bare for very long in these systems. I've described some effects of chemical weathering, but I don't want to forget other agents of mineral change. So of course, physical and biological weathering compound the effects of chemicals like acids. Seasonal freeze-thaw cycles allow water to percolate into little fissures and pores in rocks. When that water expands, of course, it enlarges the crack and starts to propagate broader fractures in rocks. I like this one because it's been split into 3 pieces. Plants, fungi, lichens, and biofilms can add to the effects of weathering, with trees sending roots into fissures, and even fungal hyphae doing their work. So it's really hard to see, but I was happy to get this photo on my phone, actually, of what is a tangle of little mycorrhizal, well, hyphal threads encasing a rock that was left by a glacier in a soil. And these factors converge. So this is a soil clod showing a round orangish red oxidized area, probably these iron-bearing minerals oxidized when the root probed down and brought air into this soil area. Okay, so I've showed you some soil and rocks, but I want to delve into a bit deeper into a particular soil. As you probably know, soils can vary dramatically in natural systems, and that's what makes them kind of hard to study. The soil on the left is a mineral soil that has complex horizonation. You see a lot of colors going on there, and it's got some groundwater seeping out at the bottom, if you can tell. This is my field assistant who actually is someone else's dog, but a great soil field assistant. The soil on the right is very different. It's not mineral at all. It's all organic, and it was collected by auger in this boggy sphagnum area. So there's constant saturation here, which has a big effect on the soil formation. I want to turn to spodosols, which are a very common soil in northern forests, especially in the Northeast, which are strongly defined by the leaching and percolation that I mentioned in the beginning. So you can see there's a upper organic horizon, and then a very bright whitish gray leached horizon, or E horizon. And immediately below that, there's a darker horizon and a reddish horizon, which have caught some of the organic matter and iron and aluminum oxides that were weathered out of the minerals in the horizon above it. So my research group found that even though we expect these spodosols to be the dominant soil in northeastern forests, we were running into pretty different soils in upslope areas. And the most striking one was these shallow soils just consisting of an eluvial or E horizon on bedrock. So no brownish or reddish horizons beneath it, just 30 centimeters of E horizon on rock. Once again, I return to the tip up. So if we look at glacially deposited rock fragments in these horizons, like the bedrock, they're exhibiting a lot of pitting and showing strong relief, which might indicate that there's some weathering going on there. And this led us to formulate a conceptual model, which I present here. So if we slice the underground forest like cake, this is what it might look like. On the left, bedrock dominated ridges have shallow soils and very fast transient groundwater. So rain's not going to stay very long in that solid bedrock, right? Then we transition to deeper soils and gradually get into more till-dominated soils on the right, which can extend to 6 meters or more. So here in this diagram, soil horizons are represented by the above colors. The schist bedrock is given in pale green. The till rock lithology is in navy. And we've got some of our hypotheses about where weathering might be strongest represented in red. So this is our concept of how weathering might affect some different mineral sources in these systems. I was really struck by the different appearance of rock fragments in the E horizon soils versus rock fragments of the same type in deeper horizons. They look totally different. So guided by this conceptual model, I'm testing mineral sources to predict how much of, say, calcium has been weathered from these different sources and how much might remain. In addition, we can use groundwater measurements from shallow bedrock wells, like the ones carried by my friends on the right, to understand how water dissolves and transports some of the minerals. Ultimately, we might be able to predict how much calcium is leaving this underground system and how much remains. Okay, I want to zoom up close. I've prepared some graphs and statistics for my dissertation at this point, but I didn't want to bore you more when I could show you pretty pictures instead. So here's an up close look at biotite weathering on the left, on the below left. It's a mica mineral. You've probably seen it glimmering around when you walk around schisty rocks and granite rocks, and you can see it starting to flake into individual sheets. It's like a book left out in the rain on the outside of this rock fragment. And this rock fragment was collected from a knee horizon. Around it, there are mysterious tracks and trails in calcium feldspar minerals. Here's an up-close look at what we think might be fungal hyphae tunneling through an apatite crystal, which is a calcium phosphate mineral. Phosphorus, of course, is important, and apatite is the only mineral source in soils. It's tightly recycled by living things, but a little leaches away every year, so it needs replenishing. We found very little apatite in E-horizons. So how can living things access it if they need more? A clue might be in some of the rocks left behind by the glacier and in bedrock. So I'm going to take you, we're going underground, but also going into a rock embedded in the soil. So this is a 2.5 centimeter dive into the rock fragment I just showed, starting at the edge. Apatite is in red and biotite is in teal. You can see the biotite is weathering a little at the edge of the rock fragment. And as we go down, doesn't look like there's any apatite. Oh, there it is, there's a little, but it's highly cracked and it's surrounded by some porosity, and some iron that's weathered from the biotite is lining some of those cracks. If we journey down, you can see there's a lot of porosity in this supposedly solid rock. So something is leaving it and being replaced by air, which could be filled by water. And finally, as we reach 2.5 centimeters in, we see a little more apatite. But again, it's connected by these little fractures. Okay, so I've taken a real deep dive. But I want to sum up by reminding you that there are patterns in soil and rock that are linked to the structure of the underground landscape. We can use those patterns in conjunction with technology like LiDAR to predict soil types and nutrient availability based on this structure. In turn, the underground world can have a big influence on above ground communities. For example, the highly leached soils I introduced tend to occur in this zone at the tops of ridges. If you're a sugar maple seedling, you're not going to be very happy in this soil since its calcium content is so low. But rock hugging birches and conifers might be perfectly content. Downslope soils like this spodosol might be more suited to trees that can access deep groundwater and deep phosphate minerals in the subsoil. And let's not forget interesting deviations from this pattern, such as bedrock seeps, which are wet areas created by sometimes fractured bedrock or deep water. And these areas can have a high groundwater pH from all the mineral buffering and attract really unique plant communities that love that basic environment. So the below ground structure can provide a perfect template for a diversity of ecological communities. And as you walk the woods, I encourage you to read and listen to the underground landscape for some fresh perspective on the ecology of your area. All right, thank you.
Right. Well, we have a few questions in the chat. I'm not sure if Lindsey is back. Yeah, Lindsey, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we dive into Q&A?
No, but those were three quite different perspectives for the audience. I hope you all enjoyed it.
All right. So, Jenny, I'm guessing this is a question for you, but why are northern forest soils so thin in depth? Not sure who wants to answer that.
Sure. Yeah. So the glaciers 14,000 years ago tended to scour a lot of our pre-existing soils off, which is a bit sad because in some areas of the world you can find like Jurassic soils that were preserved from previous times. But that means that our soils are relatively young And the deep soils we do have formed out of the sediment that was deposited, but it was deposited pretty unevenly. So, it wasn't a perfectly uniform layer. That's why we can have some really shallow soils. Good question. And then I see an earthworm question, which I probably won't be able to answer well, but I can speculate a little on. Just living in Vermont, where I do, I'm used to studying the gorgeous duff layer, forest floor layer in the White Mountains, which is, spongy, a perfect seedling home. And Lindsey can probably talk more about that actually. But when I go to some of our woods in Vermont, where earthworms like the crazy snake worm have been introduced, that organic matter has been churned into the mineral soil. So it's much more compacted, and it seems to be less of a home for plants that want to sprout there. Yeah, would you add to that, Lindsey?
No, I think that's a great job. I mean, they have a profound impact on our environment, and they chew through those leaves and that surface organic layer that Jenny was talking about. So we've done experiments. Peter Groffman from the Carey Institute down in New York, where they've done plots and they've excluded earthworms and they've added earthworms. And there's just a dramatic difference, and particularly that upper organic layer. And of course, as that disappears, it's going off into the atmosphere as CO2. So it has implications for our changing climate as well.
They are cool little organisms. Some of them can make minerals, the mineral calcite, which I just appreciate as someone who can't make her own minerals except in a lab.
And one of the things that Nikki and I are listening into is, could we hear earthworms, right, munching, right, or roots growing? I mean, they're so hard to study because, the minute you dig down, you've disturbed the system. So we are investigating, can we use sound as a way to investigate some of these below ground organisms that are just so hard to study.
Yeah, if any of you are curious about earthworms in your area, you can mix some mustard with a large quantity of water and pour it on the ground and they will come up. It's like mustard gas to them, which is kind of sad. But an earthworm scientist told me to always rinse them off because it kind of burns their skin a little, and he was feeling very protective. I think there was another question about the type of microphone used. Found in the soil. Nikki, do you want to?
I can take that. So it was a hydrophone, and that seemed to be the best at the moment when I was searching for what to use. That seemed like a logical decision to use a hydrophone. A lot of other kinds of microphones would get damaged, and this one uses water, and underground is often pretty wet, so that was carrying the sound.
Great. Any other questions? You can raise a virtual hand or put questions in the chat if anyone has others. All right. Well, we want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and thank you to Nikki and Lindsey and Jenny for sharing your work. And I think we'll probably all walk through the forest a little differently now, thinking about these different interactions and their sounds, and just, treading. We always think about treading softly. This puts a different spin on it, I think. So, so thank you all so much for joining us. And we hope you'll all come back next month, where we get to learn about lichens and mosses and liverworts, probably some more things you may not put a lot of thought into, but are around us all the time. So have a great night, everyone. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you next month.